Boom, 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 boom. A side, B side. What side are you on?
What's going on? It's another episode of A Side B Side podcast. How you doing, Adam?
I am doing very well, Brooke. Yourself?
Not too bad. So we are here for another week. Yay! Whether you like it or not, we're here. No.
You can't stop us.
We're just gonna keep coming and coming.
Yeah. We're gonna keep doing this until someone tells us not to, or we get sued by Angelina Jolie.
So back in episode 3, the soundtrack of death and the the soundtrack of death at Rising Daughters Baptist Church. You remember way back when, literally 50 episodes ago?
I would be lying if I said I knew exactly what we talked about that time, as my brain is trying to remember.
So brief recap. Your part was soundtracks really help you get through life.
Oh yeah. Because the '90s were great with soundtracks, like like Armageddon and Men in Black. Yeah.
The B side was about Harold and Thelma Swain, a really sweet, loving, faithful couple who would gun down in their church, and then the wrong person had been arrested and spent years and years in prison, and then they were released from prison because they had another suspect. Do you remember that? A guy named Eric Spar, and his mom had given police like a hairbrush with his DNA, and it ended up matching DNA on the scene, and he had like bragged about killing this couple, used like racial slurs when describing them. Well, the guy that was arrested initially, his name is Dennis Perry. He spent like 20 some odd years in prison, falsely convicted. He was released from prison last year, but yesterday or the day before, I read the article yesterday, he was fully exonerated. So he's been out, but it was still kind of lingering. They could have, tried to bring charges against him again.
Okay.
But the case has been dropped against him. He's been fully exonerated, record cleared. So Dennis Perry, kudos, congratulations. I know that's got to be a huge weight off of his head. I think that Eric Spar he hasn't been caught. I think he's still on the run.
Still out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be bittersweet. I mean, it's finally they did the right thing, but there's no way he's ever going to get
all that time
20 years of his life back. And I can't imagine how something like that changes you as a person. So
fortunately, he found a really loving woman. He's married, and I think they're still doing really well. I would not be surprised if the state didn't end up giving him something, monetarily.
I feel it feels like I am not a lawyer, but it feels like there's got to be some sort of case there, especially when it appears to be, they didn't really follow the evidence.
Right. It feels like they were like, we got to solve this. This dude's kind of okay, maybe fits. Let's throw him in jail.
Yeah, it's like they were like the first 15 minutes of a Law and Order episode where they're like, oh, we figured out the killer, cool.
Right.
And then they didn't wait for like the second part where there's always there's the twist.
Right.
Come on, guys. Law and Order episodes aren't 15 minutes long. We know this ain't the guy.
Watch anything good this week?
I have. I've been, as I mentioned before, rewatching the first season of Murder, She Wrote. And I tell you, every single episode has amazing guest stars. It's like I'll just be watching, like the next one will pop up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this has got Leslie Nielsen, or like the one I watched this morning, what had like Chuck Connors, who was the rifleman in it, and James Cromwell. Was it James Cromwell? I was trying to, but and then it was like the end of season 1, and it was the character who would then go on to be the Dr. Seth was playing a different character. And it's just so much fun to kind of be like watching and then be like, oh my gosh, this is like the place that anybody was going to be if they were, in guest starring in a show in the mid 80s. It was like, oh, well, we'll be on Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah.
And that's been really fun. And then I've started rewatching the first season of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which I have not watched in a very long time.
The best of all the Star Treks. I'm sorry.
No, I think it is. It really is. And I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I don't remember if it was on Sunday. For some reason, I have it in my head that it was syndicated on Sunday nights and we would watch it as a family. And like sometimes I would pay attention, but like we were always, it was kind of appointment TV. Uh, but it's so cool to watch something that I know I've seen before, but I'm experiencing it in an entirely different way. Just because, 40 is instead of, 7.
Right.
Which understandably have a little bit different perception.
You think?
At this point in my life, yeah, it's weird. One of I remember how boring I thought the first episode was, Encounter at Farpoint, where they first meet Q. And as a kid, I was like, nothing happens in this. This is like, because I was, Star Trek, I was used to the movies, which there's a little bit more action in the movies. And Star Trek: The Voyage Home with the whales was always one of my favorites. And,
yeah.
And I mean, I still to this day, it's a joke that I make that only makes me laugh, but I do it all the time, is when we park in a weird spot, I will, as I'm walking away from the car, I would say this to my kids all the time. Somebody remember where we parked, for when they parked the Klingon bird of prey in like the San Francisco park and then cloaked it, and then somebody remember. And I giggle every time. And I know that no one else is getting it, but it doesn't matter. Or when I'll sit down at a computer and I'll be getting frustrated with a computer. At one point, Scotty is, because they're back in the 80s, and he's trying to talk to the computer. And he sits down and he's like, hello, computer. And then the guy's like, you have to use the mouse. And he's like, oh, and he picks up the mouse like it's a walkie-talkie and goes, hello, computer.
I don't know why. That in an office.
No, I've totally done it. I've been frustrated and I've like done hello, computer, like talking into the mouse, just like in exasperation. And I'm sure no one is getting the reference, but it breaks the tension for me. So I'm not going to, smash the screen. But yeah, it's amazing how that stuff just sticks with you. But watching Encounter at Farpoint as an adult, there's so much more to the story that like was boring to me as a 7-year-old, 7, 8, 9-year-old, not sure exactly when it came out, but that I enjoyed it immensely as an adult. And I was like, okay, this is there's a lot more to this than I remembered. So I've been binging those.
Few episodes especially are very cerebral.
Oh yeah, so much of it is. And there was so much that went right over my head. Like I remember that my favorite Star Trek episode, Star Trek Next Generation episode for all time, is called Spaceship Mine, where it's this tachyon, I think it's a tachyon beam. It's basically like a deep cleaning, and so they park the Enterprise at this space base, and then everybody gets off, and then they basically like, deep clean it with a laser and like kill all the bugs, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're in space and everything, but it's like deep clean day, and so they just get everybody off the ship. But there are these guys that are trying to steal the crystals from the core, and so it's like a heist episode, and Picard is the only one left on the ship, and he doesn't have a phaser, and he's got like a bow and arrow, and he like goes like die hard on the Enterprise, and it's great, but it's an entirely different style, and it's him sneaking through the ship and attacking the bad guys, and then finally taking them all down.
I remember that one. Yeah,
it's still one of my favorites, but obviously a very different style. And then you rewatch just the first episode, the interaction where Picard, and I had totally forgot this, is so much of the first 2 episodes was like a pilot movie, basically. It's introducing all the characters, and there's this whole subplot in the first season that really doesn't play out as much later, or I didn't notice it, where Picard is, like he's new to the crew and everyone's getting to know him, and he's meeting Riker for the first time. And this whole thing about how he's like really bad with kids and has no idea how to talk to kids. And like, he even tells Riker, he's like, as the captain of the ship, I need to be seen as, genial and not a jerk. So I need you to call me out when I'm being mean to kids. I was like, oh, wow, I totally missed that before. But, and then like Riker meeting Data for the first time, and,
oh yeah,
Wesley and Dr. Crusher and their relationship with Picard, all these like human interactions that as a kid, I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But I'm like,
No,
oh, that there's a lot of interpersonal drama going on.
did you watch Picard at all?
I did, I did, and I enjoyed it, but I felt that so much of it, like it reminded me a lot of the the Next Generation movies,
Mm-hmm.
where the Next Generation movies were kind of caught in that we want to be like this blockbuster movie thing, but that wasn't really what the Next Generation was. So they always had way more space battles and like attacks, and it wasn't as cerebral as the TV show was. And so the Picard series felt like they were trying to make it like more actiony than the thought part. So I enjoyed it, but it really felt kind of forced. So
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm excited. Have you seen the teaser for the new season?
No, I still have to finish the first season. Like I got into it like real heavy, but the same thing. I was like, man, this is feeling really forced, especially with some of the plot lines and this person liking this person, but really betraying this person at the same time. And it just,
Yeah,
it felt really unnecessarily heavy.
yeah. And then there was like the which character can we like shoehorn in from the original series for like because we know people want to see them, but really not give them a part in the series.
Right.
It all felt really weird. So I in the new the teasers I've seen is season 2 is going to be Picard versus Q again,
Oh,
which I was not
interesting.
all that excited about season 2 because of the things that happened in season 1. But then as soon as that, I was like, okay, I think maybe they're going back to the soul of what this really, I mean, the dialogue between Picard and Q in Encounter at Farpoint and through the entire series is outstanding. And it's this almost, Shakespearean battle of wits and verbiage. And that was really missing in the series. So I hope that's where they're going next. Yeah.
So I have been watching, of course, I've been watching Love Island. I finished first season, which I was told that the first two seasons are crap, they're garbage. But I was already like, a buddy of mine was like, the first two seasons, like nobody watch those. Start with the third season. So I was like, okay, but I was already like more than halfway through the first season, so I was like, well, I gotta finish it.
Yeah, you gotta
Like,
I gotta figure out who wins this season, or where
right.
it's gonna go. Like I'm
So
invested.
right, I'm invested. I need to see who wins, and I think I had like seen a spoiler, so I knew, but I still at the point I was at, I was like, how does that happen? So I was like, I gotta see this through. So I skipped the second season, and I'm on the third season, and it is getting good. Like at first I was like, this is better than the first season, but now I'm like, oh, okay, it's getting, yeah, it's getting spicy. But then there's another show on Netflix. It's a new show, just came out, and it's called Heist. Now there's two shows. There's Money Heist, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's Heist. And Heist is pretty cool. It's got 6 episodes, and 2 episodes a piece. Like every 2 episodes is one heist story. So there's total of 3 heist stories, and it takes 2 episodes to tell the heist. And it's told by the actual people who committed these heists. So, like the first
Oh,
episode is a woman who's telling the story about how her and her boyfriend like robbed a casino in Vegas for like a couple $1 million.
oh wow.
And then another episode is like how these guys robbed an airport for like $8 million. And they are like telling this story of how they did it. And there's some like reenactments and things like that, but it's really cool. The last one I haven't
And of
seen yet.
course, this.
Hmm?
Oh, the last episode.
The last one I haven't seen, but it's local because it's in Kentucky, and there's a distillery here, a bourbon distillery here called Pappy Van Winkle, which is
Oh, it's huge.
apparently,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like,
It's like they make some really good stuff. I've been told it's expensive.
yeah, like when it's released here, there is like a raffle. You have to buy a raffle ticket to even be able to possibly buy. Like you have to pay like a lot of money for a raffle ticket to even be able to buy this bourbon.
That's crazy. Yeah, I have heard talk of it. Like there's to like some special bottle, like the Pappy Van Winkle something or other. Is there? We at the restaurant we have a regular who really wants shrimp tacos on the menu, and so he keeps asking about it. It's been years, and so it's this like running joke. Like he's like, if you get this specific bottle of Pappy Van Winkle and provide it, then we'll put shrimp tacos on the menu.
But apparently I can't remember what makes it so good. It's like the way it's distilled, like double distilled or something. I can't remember, but yeah, apparently it's
got some secret thing going on.
It's like a huge deal. So I am really interested to see how that Pappy Van Winkle distillery heist goes.
Yeah, probably. You got to think maybe they're going after the secret recipe or something.
They stole bottles.
Oh, they must have like aged ones or special ones, or maybe they were trying to get fish taco or shrimp tacos.
Maybe they were trying to get shrimp tacos, but yeah, because I remember listening to a podcast and it was featured on that, and they actually stole the bottles because they only make so many per run, I guess, too. So maybe that's what adds to the
scarcity,
right?
Makes it more harder to get.
Yeah.
Which I've been worried about my favorite drink, which is the Mountain Dew Kickstart Fruit Punch. If Mountain Dew is listening and would like to sponsor us, I drink about 2 to 4 of those a day.
And he is not kidding. And I feel like 2 to 4 is like a light average.
No, I've been cutting back on the caffeine. It's amazing because these only have 80 calories as opposed to a 20-ounce bottle of Mountain Dew, which has 290 calories. So
wow.
I can credit that. My favorite part is it's got 5% juice. Doesn't say which juice, but it's got 5% juice.
Look at all that juice. Look at you being healthy.
Healthy. Well, I'm going to get my own YouTube channel about the Kickstart diet. But it started to disappear from like the speedways up here. You can't buy it individually. So I now have like 2 boxes every week being delivered to my house from Amazon because I'm worried. I think it's going to disappear. Then I'm going to have to go find a new, it's like Popeye's spinach. When you lose that spinach, I don't know what I'm going to do. But yes, man. If Mountain Dew Kickstart would like to sponsor any episodes of the A-Side B-Side podcast, just reach out to us at asidebsidepodcast.squarespace.site.
.square.
Did I get that right?
Site.
Oh, I was like, did I get that right? There's no way I got that right.
So close. .square.site. You're so close.
And I did it from memory. I was so proud of myself, and then reality struck.
You were like right there, like I was right there.
Close only counts in hand grenades and horseshoes.
All right, so this is episode number 54, which means I don't know why my voice cracked like I'm going through puberty or whatever.
Because you're so excited for the A-side. I know. It's a lot to take. Real quick before we start, I wanted to highlight a couple of things. Right now, all of a sudden, like streaming services are just unleashing the floodgates of new stuff. And I have my list of stuff I really want to watch has been growing. So Gunpowder Milkshake with Karen Gillian.
Sort
of, like a John Wick style action movie. Looks amazing. And I have not set aside time to watch it, but it's available out on Netflix already. And I feel very bad because I had a countdown.
He's like an assassin or something, right? But he's helping like a little kid.
Yeah, it's very much, it feels like, like John Wick, but, with a female lead and like, lots of action and crazy stunts. And I've been following like the production on Karen Gillian's Instagram and she's been like doing behind the scenes stuff. And it's got Lena Headey and Angela Bassett and Michelle Yeoh and Carla Gugino.
Yeah, from Spy Kids.
Who I always say her name incorrectly. Gugino does not have Angelina Jolie, but she would be perfect in the movie.
I mean,
but it looks really good. So that is out now, and starting on Friday, so the day that this episode comes out, you can watch the first episode of Ted Lasso season 2 on Apple TV, which if you've not watched season 1, it is great. I think I talked about that in like episode 28 to 35, somewhere in that range.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Somewhere in there. And a couple episodes ago, we talked about Masters of the Universe, the He-Man, and sort of the history of that. the brand new cartoon written by Kevin Smith is coming out on Friday as well. And the like people involved as the voice actors are it's a pretty amazing cast. So you've got like Mark Hamill is playing Skeletor, Lena Headey is Evelyn, Alicia
That's twice
Silverstone
you've
is in it.
mentioned her. Is this now a Lena Headey podcast?
It might be just because we haven't been getting calls back from Angelina's reps on an interview, so maybe we'll just rotate. Stephen Root, Kevin Conroy, who's probably best known as the voice of Batman in Batman the Animated Series, Henry Rollins, Justin Long, Dennis Haysbert, the president from 24, and the Allstate guy, and the lead actress, who the voice of Tila, and this one kind of focuses on Tila, is one of your favorites, Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that comes out on the 23rd as well. So exciting stuff that hopefully next week I will actually find time to watch, as it's exciting that there's all this stuff, but there's too much stuff going on in life, and I need the shutdown to happen again, so I can just sit around and watch TV for 20 hours a day.
Well, you don't have Loki taking up time, so you've got time.
I have already rewatched Loki, and episode 4 is still my favorite.
Wow, is episode 4 the?
It's when they're on the moon that's gonna get destroyed. It's Loki and Sylvie like getting to know each other, and like it's just completely about the two of them going, kind of bantering and telling stories. And and the song that you mentioned, I think last week, where Tom Hiddleston sings a song, then it's already charting in like somewhere in Scandinavia.
Well, it's originally a Norwegian song, but it's charting on the world chart.
The world chart, okay.
Yeah.
So now that I've been able to share about the things that are coming up to watch, I am actually ready to start the A side.
All right.
So this week on the A side, I was looking around for a topic, and I am super excited to get back in the theater. Of course, it was 2 weeks ago when Black Widow came out, and I was able to finally go to the theater and see an action movie. And it's great to watch movies at home. And I think one of the things that I wish, like with Netflix and all these series, it's great to have the opportunity to be at home and watch it, but you don't have that like giant screen movie experience. And action movies are just more fun in the movie
big screen.
Yeah, it's cool. The explosions, it's just like it's all just supposed to be overwhelming, and some of that is lost on the little screen. And so I'm excited this weekend. I've already got my tickets reserved for Saturday.
But you've got like 5 screens. You could
just
start them all at the same time.
I could, except I recently learned that YouTube TV does limit the number of screens you could be watching at one time, even if they're all on the same internet service. So I tried that, and I got a bunch of error messages. So that was for the finals, for the NBA finals. I was trying to watch like on 2 different screens and 3, try to have them all so I could watch. Like this one would be like 5 seconds behind, so that I could watch what was happening. Then know what just happened, and I'd see an instant replay on the TV right next to it, because I'm a giant nerd. And that didn't work on 3, so I had to just do it on 2. But I survived. But the movie that I'm going to see this weekend that I'm pretty excited about, and that I had completely forgot about until I was talking with a friend of mine about a month ago, is the brand new G.I. Joe movie. But G.I. Joe, they're finally getting it right. Like they've done all these. So they did G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra in 2009, and then the G.I. Joe Retaliation in 2013, and in 2009 the lead character was Channing Tatum as Duke, and then Marlon Wayans as Breaker, and they went weird, and they gave him like superpowers basically because of these suits, and it was weird. There were some good things about it, but like it didn't really hit. So then they kind of tried to shift a little bit with 2013's Retaliation, where they basically killed everybody from the first one, and then it was Dwayne Johnson as The Rock and Adrienne Palicki as Lady J, and it was sort of a reboot, and that one was okay, but they were always focusing, in my opinion, on the wrong characters, because the coolest character ever in G.I. Joe is Snake Eyes. So this time they're just doing it right, and they're going Snake Eyes, a GI Joe origin story, and putting the right focus. And I think it could be really good. It stars Henry Golding, who of course was in Crazy Rich Asians, and right after that movie, there was all this publicity and buzz that he was going to be potentially like the next big leading man. Like he could do romantic comedies, and he could do, like, as he did Crazy Rich Asians, he did A Simple Favor, where he played like the husband, and then he was in Last Christmas. So he had like 3 or 4 like successes in a row, and they're like, this could be like the next leading man who could both do romantic
if you consider comedies. Last Christmas that much of a success, though.
Oh, it wasn't? I don't know. It had Anna.
It was just all right.
It had Anna Kendrick in it, so I'm always going to think that's a success. So, no, that was A Simple Favor. It was who was in Last Christmas. Yeah. It was
Amelia Clark.
Yes. So yeah, that one didn't do as well, because that was both of them were like, this is going to be our breakout thing, and it didn't. It was kind of a meh. But this is his first, Henry Golding's first, leading role as a action hero, and the trailer looks really good. It's going to focus on Snake Eyes, and then they don't say it in the trailer, but obviously it goes back to his origin story and his relationship with Storm Shadow. So I'm very excited about that. And I was like, okay, we've talked about Masters of the Universe. We've talked about the real Ghostbusters and the Ghostbusters cartoons from the 80s. Just natural that we would then talk about G.I. Joe, which to me was all about the 80s and 90s cartoon and action figures. But much like every episode of the cartoon ended with knowing is half the battle, I have now learned just how much I don't know or didn't know about how the G.I. Joe that I associate as G.I. Joe came to be. I remember as a kid, I was talking with my dad about action figures and stuff, and he shared that like G.I. Joes used to be, they were like the boys' Barbie, basically. Barbie was such a big success.
With Kung Fu Grip,
but they were like 12-inch figures, and they had the clothes and everything, and it was very similar. And I never put 2 and 2 together, really, that somehow they went from 12-inch figures with like clothes that you could change out to these smaller plastic figures with this huge story behind them. And as I was doing the research, I found out that right before I was born, so stuff that was not happening in my brain, there wasn't really G.I. Joes that were happening. G.I. Joes were in the 12-inch big, with the cloth clothes and everything, were from about 1963, 64 into the 70s. But in the 70s, they kind of switched to the adventure team, and they were, adventurers and hunters and less military. But from 76 until 1983 or 1982, there were no G.I. Joes available. And in fact, the action figure company Hasbro had basically shelved them because they weren't selling anymore, and had kind of given up on them. And they had it as this thing that they could go back to, but they didn't feel like kids were excited about military action figures anymore, so they needed to find something else out. So in the late 70s and early 80s, as they're trying to figure out how to get this thing relaunched, they ended up going through several different iterations of like, how are we going to relaunch it? And I guess if you believe there are varying accounts, but according to former editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, Jim Shooter, the G.I. Joe Real American Hero that I associated with the brand came to be because there were 2 guys at a charity event in the bathroom. This is directly what Jim Shooter says happened. He said somebody from Hasbro was at an event that Marvel's president was at, and they were in the men's room standing next to each other at the urinals, and that's how they met, and they started talking to each other about each other's respective business, which in the grand social contract of life, standing at urinals and talking, it's a very strange thing. It does happen, But there's also that, sort of social contract where you just stare ahead and you don't want to make eye contact. It's a very strange thing because every other, bodily function we're in stalls and we're secluded. But this, we're just kind of standing next to each other. And then we don't even want to go into the whole trough versus urinal thing. It's a strange part of human culture. But they started talking about each other's business, and Hasbro the president mentioned that he wanted to reactivate the trademark on G.I. Joe, but they couldn't figure out how to get the buzz back and get people interested, and especially kids, in buying action figures again for military action figures. And Marvel was like, well, we have the best creative people in the world. Let's bring in the editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter, and we'll create something. So Marvel had a comic book writer and creator named Larry Hama, who had been working on a comic book called Fury Force. And Marvel, when we hear Fury, we obviously think, Nick Fury. But before the Samuel Jackson MCU version of Nick Fury, you had more of a military style Nick Fury. Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos, the Howling Commandos that we see in Captain America. Those guys were with Nick Fury and Sergeant Fury in World War II, and it was very much a military comic. So they had been working on trying to relaunch Fury as Fury Force as well. And it had the son of Nick Fury assembling a team of commandos to battle neo-Nazi terrorist Hydra. Hama decided to take that idea and adapt it for G.I. Joe. So it became G.I. Joe as the military force, and then Archie Goodwin was the gentleman who invented Cobra as the bad guy. Because up until 1982, and this was a shock to me, when you had G.I. Joes, you just had G.I. Joes. They didn't have a bad guy. There was no foil, which kind of makes sense. I mean, it's not like Barbie has anti-Barbie that she fights against. You just do
She's
Barbie
Skipper.
stuff.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Isn't Skipper the little sister?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Maybe there's a whole drama there. Maybe that'll be the next episode. I didn't know. But so Cobra and Cobra Commander were created basically to give G.I. Joe a foil for the comic books. And Hasbro had never made villain toys before. They were like, nobody's going to buy the villain toy because you always want to buy the heroes. Kids aren't going to want to buy the villain toy. And that's where my personal connection with G.I. Joes comes into play. In the mid 80s, and I'm going to get the date wrong because I was really young. My father was getting his PhD at the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. And he was teaching during the year. And then in the summers, we would go to Columbia, Missouri from our home in Nebraska. And he would take classes and work on his PhD. So for a couple summers and then one full year, we were living in two places. And I believe one of those summers, I don't know if it was 84, 85, 86, I was at home and my parents went out, I would assume a date night. It was probably to a movie, and they hired a babysitter from the church to watch me. And the babysitter took me to Toys R Us, and she had to get a gift for, I think, her grandson. But since we were there, she said that I could pick out a toy too. Now, at this point in my life, all of my toys were Legos. All I had was Legos. I love Legos. I had never purchased an action figure at all. And we're walking down, and I can remember this vividly, walking down the aisle and just looking at all of these toys and stuff that, like, I would never, my parents would always be like, oh, let's go look at the Legos. So I'd never walk down the other aisles of the toy store. And I don't remember ever going to Toys R Us before. So it was like traveling to the seventh layer of toy heaven, and just being able to walk through and look at everything. And my folks, when I was a kid, did not want me playing with guns. I didn't have toy guns. I'd made them out of Legos, so it was sort of counterproductive. But we didn't play guns. We tried to
little boys will always find a way to play with guns.
It's just kind of one of those things. But we're walking down the aisle, and I see all these action figures, and I see G.I. Joe ones. And I don't know if I knew about G.I. Joe through like playing with friends at school and stuff and playing pretend or what, but I decided to pick out a G.I. Joe action figure. And in a moment that has already been discussed with several therapists since, I went through and I picked out the G.I. Joe villain character, the Baroness. And the Baroness is this beautiful, dark-haired, wearing completely like a leather, get up. That's the action figure I picked out, an action figure that I still have to this day. If it was still in the packaging, it's worth like $80, but it just sits on my desk. But I bought the villain thinking, okay, if I buy the villain, maybe my parents will let me buy the good guy, so I'll be able to have two items. So it was like planning ahead in my head. It's like, this way, this is how I'll sell it to my folks. And so the very first action figure I bought was a leather-clad femme fatale, which has definitely impacted the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But it worked because then my parents let me buy Duke later on, so I had both Duke and the Baroness. And slowly over, like the rest of my life, would occasionally get G.I. Joe action figures, and I still have them all in a crate that's sitting in storage. I was moving things around the other day and I found them all. But it's really interesting to me that one, Hasbro didn't want to make villain toys, and they only introduced female characters because of the Marvel comic book developed by Larry Hama. So when he developed the comic book that had the G.I. Joes fighting Cobra, they also started working in female characters, because in the G.I. Joe lexicon or the world, there had only been soldiers. So the G.I. Joes had both heroes that were male and female and villains that were male and female, and they all sold pretty well, and the comic book turned into one of Marvel's biggest successes. And the storylines that Larry Hama created for the comic book then influenced the toys and their packaging. And one of the coolest things that I remember about every G.I. Joe that I saw in the early, from 1982 to 1994, when the Real American Hero line was discontinued, is not only did you get the action figure, and you usually got some accessories like a gun or a backpack or like a special helmet, you also got a file card. And on each file card, which was about the size of like a baseball card or a trading card, you got all this detail. It was just like a trading card. You got all this background and biography about the character, and they all had this fleshed out story that then you could use when you got home and you were playing the story. You're like, oh, I know this guy's entire background, and I know what he's good at and his attributes and like what specializations are. And every one of those file cards was, well, most of them, they were all, at first they were all created by Larry Hama, but at some point I'm sure he wasn't writing every single one, but he was largely responsible for them. And he would basically, they were his notes when he's developing the characters, and he had a U.S. military background, so he would use some of that when creating each character. So they came, it was a simple plastic toy that was less than 4 inches tall, but it came with its entire backstory. And then I was like, okay, why are these so small? Well, it turns out that the reason that G.I. Joes went from the big 12-inch, almost Barbie-sized figures to the 3.5 or 3 3/4 inch ones that I associate with G.I. Joe was for two reasons. One, the success of Kenner's Star Wars line, which used the smaller figures, and in the late 70s and early 80s, the gas crisis or oil crisis, where gas and oil prices just shot up, impacted how expensive it was to make toys out of plastic. So they were able to make way more toys because they were much smaller, and it was more cost effective because they were like, we're never going to be able to make this work with the prices that it cost per 12-inch figures. So Larry Hama developed the comic book, and then that went into the toys, and they ran from 1982 all the way to 1994. 1994, Hasbro just acquired Kenner and spun G.I. Joe off into business-wise was run by Kenner, and Kenner decided to reimagine things and did the most 90s thing in the world, which they canceled the successful thing and came back with, and this is such a 90s word, it was G.I. Joe Extreme.
Oh boy.
Because everything in the 90s was extreme.
Extreme, yeah.
It was extreme and it was neon.
There was even a group named Extreme.
There was, yeah, but that was before they were the late 80s, early 90s. It was perfect. But like you had extreme sports, you had like X Games, you had this. It was like extreme was like the buzzword of the 90s, and neon too. So in the most illogical thing, they kind of rebooted it, and they had like different lines for the characters. And one was a group of ninjas, but they all wore neon, which is the exact opposite thing that you would think of. Ninjas, you know, they're stealth. They don't run. They're where like, you know, they hide in the shadows. They don't wear neon, and they started getting bigger weapons and like spring-loaded stuff. And it definitely the heyday of G.I. Joe had passed, and it, you know, eventually kind of got canceled. They rebooted it a couple times. They've tried various attempts to reboot it as a toy. The 25th anniversary was in 2007, so they rebooted it again. The comic book at one point, according to Marvel, was their number one subscription comic book. So it was outselling Spider-Man, you know, the X-Men. It was the number one thing. So they poured all this money into the TV show because it was helping sell both the comic book and the toys. And I guess the reason they decided to do a cartoon for the comic book was that the comic book at the time in the 80s, you could have a longer commercial about a comic book that had animated characters than you could for toys. Because with toys, you could only have so many seconds where you showed the toys animated, because it would potentially be false advertising. Because if you see a cartoon character running around and then you just get a plastic thing, there was thoughts that this would be false advertising. Whereas a comic book, you didn't have the same restrictions. So that was Hasbro and Marvel's end around advertising rules. So they made the comic book first, and then the toys from the comic book, and the advertisements were technically for the comic book, which then helped sell the toys. An entire economy and you know, circle of life that I never even thought of. But it's amazing to see how these creations happen to get around rules. G.I. Joe then, of course, had a movie and crossed over with Transformers, because they exist in the same universe. The Transformers movie, which is considered one of the greatest animated movies of the 80s, did impact the G.I. Joe movie to the point where, like, spoiler alert, in the Transformers movie, Optimus Prime dies. And that is, like, for Adam on level with, like, the horse from, what was that? Atreyu and the horse.
Never-ending story.
Never-ending story. And, like, any Ewok passing away in Return of the Jedi. It was a big, scary moment, and didn't get kids were upset. So
it was traumatizing.
It was
don't
traumatizing.
Kill Prime.
Yeah. And so they, in the G.I. Joe movie, they originally had killed Duke. But then after test audiences, they were like, we can't do this. So it seems like he's dead. And all the animation, like, everyone's really upset. And then there's a voiceover that's like, he's just in a coma.
Oh my gosh.
Because they're like, oh no, he's fine. He gets better. Which I thought was pretty funny. Then it went on to have the movies that we had mentioned earlier. G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, which I had such hopes for. And honestly, Sienna Miller as the Baroness is probably the best thing from 2009's The Rise of Cobra. They did have a couple callbacks to the movie to the series. They do mention, you know, knowing is half the battle, and the famous line that you mentioned earlier, the Kung Fu grip, which was used in TV commercials, shows up in the movie as well. Ray Park played Snake Eyes in both the 2009 G.I. Joe and the 2013 reboot.
Ray Park, he's Darth Maul, isn't he?
Sequel, which was really a reboot. Yeah. He's Darth Maul. He was Toad in the X-Men movies. Did you know in Phantom Menace he was like 24 years old?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was really young. I had no idea. So I'm watching this. It came out in 1999, and watching it as an 18-year-old, and Darth Maul was only like 6 years older than me. That I had no idea until I was researching it. That was kind of blew my mind. I was
gonna
wow.
say mind blowing for you, huh?
Yeah, I was like, man, I'm so much more the same age as Darth Maul than I thought. He played Snake Eyes in both of those movies, and they did okay. They weren't the huge hits, and I think, in my opinion, it's because they were focusing on the wrong characters. I mean, General Hawk was always this sort of just minor character that he was the one who ran everything, but Dennis Quaid played him in the 2009 movie, and evidently the filmmakers enjoyed his performance so much that they kept adding scenes for him because they liked working with Dennis Quaid. But then you've got all these scenes with this guy who's not really that integral to the movie. And the whole idea of giving the, Duke and Breaker these suits that basically made them superheroes just really didn't fit right. So they got a little bit more right with G.I. Joe Retaliation with The Rock. It's hard to make an action movie with The Rock and have it be bad. They do, again, spoiler alert, they kill Duke. They finally followed through on that, as they didn't do in the animated movie in the 80s. They did do that in 2013, and it is a shocking moment in the movie. But then they bring in Bruce Willis at one point. It's sort of just a Deus ex machina moment where he comes in to help everything, and it just doesn't. It again feels like they weren't really focused on the right characters. So I'm super excited to go on Saturday and see this story that I've been connected to since I was a 4 or 5-year-old kid, buying an action figure because of a really cool babysitter, and the focus being again on the Snake Eyes. And in a little moment or a little surprise for me, Baroness is also making a return in Snake Eyes. So she is set to be portrayed by Ursula Corbeau, who is an actress that is new to me, but I was already super excited to see Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, face off. But now that I know Baroness is in it, now I want to see it even more. So that comes out this July 23rd. So today, Friday, as you're listening to it, and I will give you a full review before episode 55 next week. And that is the A side.
Well, alrighty then. Alrighty then. Well, the B side has absolutely nothing. Can't even relate it. Sometimes I'm able to and be like, oh, well, that worked out, because we don't know what the other is going to talk about. I have no clue. And sometimes it works out. Like last week, we both talked about New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not related at all.
Yeah. Which was a total coinkydink.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No.
So I know I have been warned multiple times. I need a story with closure. I know you like those.
I like closure.
I know you do. I know my mom is like, I need a story with closure, but sometimes it's just not possible in the true crime realm. Things happen. Mm-hmm. Things are not resolved. And in those cases, sometimes, maybe, just maybe, as you listen to this now Lena Headley podcast, you may have some information. It could be like an old family secret, some kind of old tall tale that's been passed down.
Urban legend.
Right. You might have some information you don't even know. So that's why sometimes we have to do those ones that are not solved. So this week, we're talking about the Millbrook twins. So Danette Latanya and Jeanette Latrice Millbrook are fraternal twins. They were born on April 2nd, 1974 in Augusta, Georgia. Danette and Jeanette had 8 brothers and sisters, and they were like smack in the middle. Wow. Yeah, big family. loads of aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews. Like their family sounds kind of like when I think of when my family used to do like the big family every year. We would go home and like the entire family would get together, and my grandparents had 6 kids, and then all their kids, and then all of our kids, and then our cousins, and it like a huge thing. That's like her family is huge. So the girls lived with their mom, Mary Louise Sturgis. They didn't really have much contact with their dad at all, to be honest. It's even hard to find his name.
Oh, wow.
And he really doesn't deserve the recognition, to be honest.
Fair.
So on the morning of March 18th, 1990, the girls walked to Church's Chicken to get lunch with money given to the family by their pastor. They returned home and they told their mom, Louise, that a man in a white van had followed them along their walk. There's not really been any other details that were given. It was just they felt creeped out by this man in this white van that had followed them.
Bad vibes save lives.
Exactly. I couldn't even find like the race of the man. So that should tell you like no details. So later on, about 3:00 that afternoon, the twins walked to their godfather, Ted's house, which is about 2 miles away. So their godfather was giving them money for the city bus that they had to take to get to school. See, the family had actually recently moved to a new part of the city into a new apartment, and it was actually further from their school. So they go to their godfather, Ted's, and they get money from him. He gives them $20 for bus fare, and it was actually a little extra so they could get some snacks. So they leave their godfather. I looked this all up on a map because I wanted to see like the distances. So they leave their godfather's. He lived on Forest, and on their journey back home, they make a couple of stops. First, they stop at their cousin's house, and they stop at their older sister's house. When they are leaving their cousin Juanita's house, the girls ask their cousin Juanita to walk them home. But it was getting later in the evening, and Juanita's mother told her no because she didn't want her daughter walking home alone. Understandable.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I feel like the girls were really spooked by this van because now they've asked someone to walk with them. As it gets a little bit darker, they're like, we want somebody to walk with us. So they leave Juanita's and then they head over to their older sister's house, and they stay there for about 15 minutes before heading out. And they also ask their older sister to walk them home. But their older sister had just given birth, and so she declined. Like she had a brand new baby.
Yeah, probably not minutes before, but.
Right. But within like a few days. And so, she said, no, understandable. Cause I remember those days when you first have a baby.
Yeah, no, that's, these kids are trying to do the right thing. They're asking for people to walk with them.
But I think that also shows how spooked they were. Cause now that's 2 people that they've asked to walk with them. So they leave their older sister's house and they stop at a local gas station on 12th Street and MLK Junior Boulevard, where they purchase some chips, some candy, and some soda pop. Some pop, as we say back home. The clerk at the gas station, Gloria, knew the twins, and she didn't really, nothing unusual stood out about them that day. It was just a typical day of the twins coming in and grabbing some stuff.
Yeah.
The walk from Forest to 12th and MLK looks like it's about 5 minutes from what I saw. Because remember, I looked it up on the map. Gloria, the clerk at the gas station, is the last person to see the twins alive. The last thing Jeanette was seen wearing was a blue pullover shirt over a white turtleneck with a beige skirt, white stockings, and white sneakers. That's the same outfit that she wore when the family went to church earlier that day. Jeanette, at the time of the disappearance, was 5'4", about 125 pounds. Danette was last seen wearing a white Mickey Mouse t-shirt, white jeans, and black shoes. She was 5'6" and 130 pounds at the time of their disappearance. Danette was described as bow-legged, which means having legs that kind of curve outward at the knees. Both girls had their ears pierced, shoulder-length hair that was jerry curled, and they both had a scar near their belly button from hernia surgery shortly after birth. That day, their younger sister, Shanta, wanted to actually go with them because she just liked being with her sisters. She liked being with her older sisters. I mean, that's just younger siblings, right?
Yeah, they always just want to hang out, and then the older siblings are like, "Ah, why do you want to always come along?"
Right. And they did what older siblings usually do. They don't want their younger sibling with them. So they're like, no.
Yeah.
So the plan was for the girls to be home before dinner around 7 p.m. Danette and Jeanette were freshmen at Lucy C. Laney High School, and they were both known to be really good girls, and they weren't known to get into any trouble at all, typically. They had no history of running away. There was no reason to be found for this disappearance. There's only one incident that had ever been reported about the girls of any type of misbehavior. And that was actually as a result of Jeanette being bullied out of a bus stop. So in 1989, just before high school, the girls ended up at different schools because Danette had some problems academically. And these problems caused Danette to be held back a grade, resulting in them using different bus stops. So a local unnamed girl used Jeanette's alone time as an opportunity to bully her. And Jeanette was noted to be extremely passive and non-confrontational, making her really easy prey for this other teen. Well, as it does, word gets back to the sibling. So Danette gets word about what was happening to her sister, and she was having absolutely none of it.
None of it.
Siblings, look, I can mess with my sibling, but you better not mess with my sibling.
Absolutely. Like it's the same thing about like your hometown. Like people, I can stop bad stuff about my hometown, but you can't.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So as soon as Danette found out what was happening to Jeanette, she went to the bus stop and confronted the girl, and they ended up in a fight. Well, the fight, as they do, draws a crowd, draws attention. And it just so happened that during this incident, this fight, an Augusta police officer was driving past. He saw the crowd, looks through the crowd, sees the fight, he pulls over, breaks up the scuffle. He took both girls' names, but no punishment really seemed to ever come from it. So this is like the only trouble ever reported that the girls ever got into, in school or out. It should be noted, the local bully was actually related to the principal at Lucy Laney. And it is this possible relationship that might have corrupted a bit of the early investigation into the disappearance. And we'll talk about that here in a second.
Okay.
So Shanta and Mary, their mom, their little sister and mom, go looking for the twins that night when they didn't return home by, their specified time. And they're walking the neighborhood, they're walking all over, no sign of the girls. So they get home, they call the police, but they were told by the Richmond County Sheriff's Office that they needed to wait 24 hours to file a report. And that used to be the thing, which of course now it's different, especially if it's different for anyone, but especially for a kid.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
Most kids don't get 24 minutes away from, somebody taking a look at them or knowing where they are.
Right.
Anymore, no more like leave the house in the morning and come back at lunch.
Exactly. It's if you leave this house and you're not to your destination, and when you get to your destination, you need to let me know that you've arrived. And if you don't, I need you to send me your location on your phone. It's a different world now.
Yeah. It's I'm sure the world worked just fine, but it's nice to know that like you can check on like, okay, let me look at my phone, find my phone. We could find out where people are.
Yeah.
As a parent, as a kid, that would have driven me nuts.
Right. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of information available about the initial investigation. What we do know is after the first 24 hours passed, Mary called the authorities. And again, the detective kind of blew her off and was like, well, they probably just ran away, which is complete BS because and we know this to be a fact, if these had been two young white teens, it would have been handled very differently. This was a time where if it was Black youth, it was, oh, they ran away. And that was it.
Yeah.
Somehow the original police file was lost.
Or never created.
Right. That's probably more like it. On April 8th, the family was informed that the case was being closed because the girls would now be 17, an age where they legally could not be forced to return home if they were located. There's some serious misinformation too regarding about the case closure and the girls' location as well. Like, the original case investigator says that he was told by a juvenile caseworker that the girls had been located, and that this led to the case being closed and the removal of their names and information from the National Registry of Missing and Exploited Children. There were multiple mistakes made initially in the reports about the girls that probably hindered the investigation as well. For instance, the misspelling of the girl's last name as Millbrooks with an S instead of Millbrook. There is no S on their last name. Another mistake was that Jeanette's middle name was listed as Latresa, Latressa. Her middle name is actually Latrice, Latrice. Totally different name.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually remained incorrect on the case files and any associated database, like NCMEC, the National, why can I not remember the name of it? I know the name of it because I just said it.
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Thank you. I'm like, I literally just said it. Okay, thank you.
I can't believe I got that right and still can't get our website right.
But yes, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It seems like no real genuine effort was actually put forth in investigating. Again, mom told that they were runaways. Yeah. And, now they're 17. They were
now, they're too old. Can't find them.
The only people that were interviewed that day or period about them in the investigation was Gloria from the gas station and their godfather, Ted. Even their biological father, who wasn't interviewed, he had a criminal background and an extremely rocky relationship with Danette and Jeanette, and he lived close to where the girls disappeared from.
Yeah, this is any TV show. It's the first person you go and interview.
Right. So the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children, NCMEC, tried to help the family by printing flyers and posters about the girls. But aside from that, the family didn't really receive much support. Then, once the case was closed, the center no longer saw the need to help push the case.
Right.
So website unresolved.me mentions the Masters, the golf tournament.
Oh, okay.
Augusta is the home of the tournament, which hits the city typically in the first week of April. In recent years, there's been an alleged link between the Masters and sex trafficking. Sex trafficking, of course, is always an issue, but with the Masters comes high rollers with big paychecks, weird quirks.
Yeah,
those checks.
You heard about Super Bowl, any big event where a lot of people come into town, it's a potential. You basically get cover because there's a lot of people coming and going.
Right. And with those big high rollers with big paychecks, it gives them the resources to satisfy those weird quirks and more financial means to hide it. So the police monitor the high-end establishments and websites like Craigslist and Backpage for illicit activity. But back then, nobody really talked about what a big problem sex trafficking has always been. I mean, we talk about it now, but not then.
Yeah.
So earlier we mentioned a few record discrepancies, the girl's last name and Jeanette's middle name. The police also incorrectly had their birth date listed as April 7th, one day before the police meeting with the family to inform them that the case was closed. Their actual birthday, April 2nd. So even though the case was officially closed, that did not stop the girl's family from continuing to contact the sheriff's department to inquire about the girl's location. They were given multiple different explanations for the case closure. Like I said, first, their age. We talked about that, but what we didn't explore is the reason stating that they had been located.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently,
pretty big mistake to make.
yeah. Oh, just wait. So apparently, one explanation given to the family was that the girls had been removed from the home, placed in foster care, and adopted. Can we take a moment to look at how disturbingly false this would appear at face value?
Like, how do you get that wrong?
Right.
Like that should have a lot of paperwork.
Massive trails of paperwork, not to mention it's not true.
Right. So it should be pretty easy to prove.
Like, first of all, why would a mother report her children missing to the very authorities who would have taken the children from the home in the first place? Mm-hmm. Also, why would they have been taken? There were no issues there. Also, 2 15-year-olds placed in foster care and adopted immediately? No. I mean, it's possible. Highly unlikely. Highly improbable. Like, it's possible, though. But, like, let's look at some stats. The most commonly adopted children, newborn to 3 years old. As children age, their likelihood sadly drops. According to the Adoption Network, the average age of a child waiting to be adopted is 8, and more than 60% of children in foster care spend 2 to 5 years in the system. 20% spend 5 or more years in the foster care system. Side note, private adoption, 62% were placed with their adoptive family within a month of birth. So, I mean, there is a difference between foster care and private adoption. But again, people want babies.
Yeah. And it's just because it's possible doesn't mean it's probable.
Exactly. In 2019, of the 65,972 children adopted, only 11,663 were Black. So you're telling me 2 Black teen females were put in foster care and immediately adopted, defying all statistics? Yeah, I don't think so. Right. Yeah. There was a close relative that had children in foster care, so that could be where the confusion stemmed from, but a huge mistake to make. Huge. Mm-hmm. All of the calls from the family led to the case being reopened in 2013. During an interview, the sheriff was quoted as saying, "We think a terrible injustice has been done for the last 20 years. You think?
20 years.
So this helped to temporarily fuel new interest in the new investigation. The case is still currently open with the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. In 2017, the Sheriff's Office met with the Millbrook family to discuss the case and to collect familial DNA samples. I'm presuming to test against their database or maybe against, like missing. There's a website that I've looked at before, and it's unidentified people, and you can go and try
Jane Doe's.
Yes. So maybe they're trying to, test the DNA against maybe remains that have been found. I don't know.
Sure seems like a Hail Mary. Like, well, we'll try this now.
Yeah. So one more theory we need to discuss is the runaway theory. These were based on, remember that school principal that we talked about earlier? Mm-hmm. So the school principal talks to authorities and seems to have concluded that it was a strong possibility that the girls ran away to start a new life. Apparently, the original investigator concluded that one of the girls, don't know which one, they speculated, had gotten pregnant, and so they both ran away together. There's definitely no evidence to back that up. Neither girl even had a known boyfriend at the time of their disappearance. Plus, the older sister that we mentioned that they visited on the day of their disappearance was a teen mom. So it's not like they feared repercussions. Mm-hmm. Their younger sister, Shanta, the one that went looking for them with their mom, became a teen mom a few years later. So there was no reason to run. There was no, it's not like they were like, oh, my mom's going to, where would you conclude that?
Right. It sounds like a lazy and biased idea.
Yeah. So, of course, this conclusion seriously set the case back as well. There is a podcast called The Fall Line that has taken an active interest in this case and even helped to raise a $10,000 reward. The sheriff's department never announced the reward. So the Fall Line podcast, along with Unresolved.me, teamed up to raise money for a billboard to advertise the reward. As of March 2018, just over $2.5 thousand had actually been raised. Additionally, the billboard, from what I could find, went up Thursday, March 2018. It was raised on Milledgeville Road near Tubman Home Road. The billboard itself offered $8,000 for help resolving the disappearance of the twins, and it shows 4 photos, 2 of them at the time of their disappearance at the age of 18, and 2 age progressed photos of what they would look like, or what they would have looked like in 2018. According to the Missing Danette and Jeanette Milbrook Facebook page, a new billboard went up May 22nd of this year. The reward is now up to $11,000, and it shows the girls at age 15 and age progressed to this year of 2021. The tip line is anonymous. So again, like I said, maybe you have family in Augusta and they know somebody that knows somebody and have said stories. It's 404-590-2975. And the website is themillbrooktwins.com. These girls, now women, have been missing for over 30 years, and their mom, their family, Mary and Shanta, have not given up their fight for information and justice. Interestingly, Joseph Patrick Washington, a prolific sexual offender and killer, was active in the girls' neighborhood at the time of their disappearance. And there have been those that believe he's responsible or at least involved in their disappearance. Washington was sentenced to 17 consecutive life sentences in 1995 for crimes including abduction and sexual assault. He was set to face the death penalty for the death of 2 women, but died in 1999 before his trial started. The twins, the Milbrook twins, Danette and Jeanette, are the only twins to go missing in the U.S. whose disappearance remains unsolved. The Charlie Project still has their descriptions up. You know, once the case was reopened, that information went up. And their descriptions are exactly the same with the exception of one line. It reads, African-American female, black hair, brown eyes, hair styled in shoulder length, jerry curl at the time of disappearance. Her ears are pierced, one each, and she has a scar near her navel. She has a scar on her navel from a hernia removal operation performed shortly after birth. The only difference is Danette's description also stated that she was bow-legged. So if you have any information, again, the tip line is anonymous.
Wow.
That is the story of the disappearance of the Milbrook twins.
And they just have no details because of no
Whatsoever.
investigation.
I can tell you, when you know someone, I've not had kids go missing, so I'm not saying that, but when there is someone in your life that just vanishes, I can't imagine having been in that situation where someone I knew and loved just disappeared. I can't imagine being a mom in that situation.
Yeah, for 30 years of hope and pain.
And you'll never give up hope. You'll never stop looking. You'll never stop hoping to find. No matter what that closure is, I'm sure she just needs that closure. Even if it's finding out they aren't here anymore, but just knowing what happened.
Yeah.
I hope that family gets closure someday. Soon, like very soon.
Yeah, because, I mean, mom, like, 30 years is a long time. Hopefully, you know, they're still around when they get to, you know, we get information where they can still know.
Yeah. There you go. That is the B-side. This one was like, I mean, all of them are bummers. Like, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a true crime, but this was just.
It's sometimes the bummer is just the knowing hearing the gruesome details and the loss of life, but at least there's, it feels entirely different just knowing nothing and having like not even like a white van, and then maybe there was this guy in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing to hold on to. I mean, that's way scarier than hearing about actions that took place and just the unknown.
And again, I am not a private investigator. I am not a detective, but I would not be shocked if that white van was connected to the sex trafficking of the masters. I wouldn't be surprised, or sex trafficking of any kind.
Right.
But yeah, I hope and pray for that family that they get some kind of answers and closure.
Yeah, and it's going to take, whether it's the DNA or it's going to take something unique, like a body being discovered or somebody, putting their DNA in a history match and finding out something, like they're a familiar match. It's going to take something like that, because it feels like there's just nowhere to even start looking.
Yeah. Maybe someone will make a dying declaration or something. I don't know, but
yeah.
There you go. That's the B-side. Now that I've bummed you more than normal.
Yeah. It's okay. Want to talk about action figures again?
Oh man. All right. Well, before we go, I'm gonna give you that number again though, just in case.
Yeah.
So it is 404-590-2975. Of course, we would absolutely love if you would not just like and leave a comment, but share the podcast. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell your friends about the podcast. You might, what's really funny is I've heard multiple times from different people, like, of course, women, we love true crime, and people will be listening with their significant other or their spouse, and their spouse is not into true crime, but then they get the A side, which is like the movies and old school TV shows and things like that. And then that always draws the men in. So there's a little something for everybody.
Yeah. And that's, you get both sides of the coin. So you get a little of this, a little of that.
Mm-hmm. So please go ahead and share, tell your friends, tell your family, tell, as many people as possible.
complete strangers on the street. Like, you see that guy listening to something, you just be like the Limu guy. Hey, you listen to the A-side, B-side podcast? Oh, since you asked, let me tell you more about it.
Oh, we would greatly appreciate a like and a review on Apple. Also, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also are, of course, on all the streamers. Our website, Adam,
is A-side, B-side podcast.square.site.
Yes, nailed it.
Yes. Practicing in the mirror. It's pretty fun. Psyching myself up.
You can get to us on all of our socials. We've got Twitter, we've got Instagram, we've got Facebook. And am I forgetting any? Oh, if you would like to, we will post all of our sources on our website, along with pictures. While you're there, you can grab yourself a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, a coffee mug. That's a great way to support the podcast as well.
Yeah, just buy a coffee mug and then just leave it at your favorite coffee shop. Guerrilla marketing.
There you go. Also, I think that's all. You can email us, asidebsidepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. Our MySpace site is currently under construction. So
yes.
That is not.
We had to revamp our top 8.
We're fighting over our top 9 friends. We are. The top 9, top 8.
Top 8.
Top 8. Man, it's been a bit.
All right. There was episode 54. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Brooke.
As always, thank you for listening to A-Side, B-Side podcast. If you enjoy the show, please, if you don't mind, head on over to Apple and leave us a rating or a review. And if you'd like to continue to support the podcast, you can do so by heading on over to Patreon, or you can buy us a coffee, as well as buying merch on our website, asidebsidepodcast.square.site. From Adam and I at A-Side, B-Side podcast, please remember to wear your mask, social distance if you're around people that don't live in your household, and just be safe and happy. Thanks again from us here at A-Side, B-Side podcast.